Lord, hasten to bring in your kingdom on earth, when no one shall hurt or destroy, when wisdom and justice shall reign in the land, and your people shall go forth in joy. In the name of the one who is to come, amen. This is the testimony given by John. I am not the Messiah. I am not Elijah, nor am I a prophet. I am not worthy. The John we meet this morning in the Gospel of John the Evangelist is, in short, a refusenik. The fourth Gospel, as we will hear in the weeks to come, doesn't give us the colorful Christmas narratives of Matthew or Luke. And this morning, the introduction to John lacks what Mark showed us last week, a character clothed in camel's hair and on a leather belt, eating locusts and wild honey. We have none of that in this stark telling. There was a man sent from God, we are told. Not the cousin of Jesus, but simply a messenger. One who has come into a darkening world to testify to the light. What we can extract from this morning's introduction in the fourth gospel is that, like the Jesus who comes after him, the Baptist has a habit of stiff-arming glory, stiff-arming anything that looks like the worship of him. He is the opposite of a narcissist, pointing always away from himself to some other. I'm just the friend of the bridegroom, he will say later in John's Gospel. My joy, he will say at the advent of Jesus, has been fulfilled. He must increase, but I must decrease. So, it's a strange kind of joy we celebrate this third Sunday of Advent, called by some Gaudete Sunday, Rejoicing Sunday, Pink Candle Sunday. Joy, not merriment. Joy, not incidental happiness. Joy, not necessarily optimism. But joy is a kind of stance, a receptivity. Now, because John is sharp-eyed and apparently without sentimental delusions, he probably senses that the attention he is getting from the Pharisees this morning will lead ultimately to his imprisonment, ultimately to his beheading. The ancient Jewish historian Josephus wrote that Herod was to have John imprisoned and killed in about the year 28 or 29 of our common era for, quote, the great influence John had over the people, which might persuade John to raise a rebellion. For the people seemed ready to do anything he would advise. Now, none of this darkness and politically revolutionary energy is a traditional part of the Advent story. John's Gospel doesn't detail the Baptist's death with, for the example, the attention and drama Mark's Gospel will afford it. But it's important, I think, this morning to reflect on these dimensions of John because they help us understand something deeper about the joy of this Advent season. Herod reigns. Herod reigns wrote poet and Russian political dissident Joseph Brodsky once in a poem simply titled December 24th, 1971. Emptiness, Brodsky writes. Emptiness. But the mere thought of that brings forth lights, as if out of nowhere. Herod reigns. But the stronger he is, the more sure, the more certain the wonder. In the constancy of this relation is the basic mechanics of Christmas. The basic mechanics of Christmas. Now, Brodsky was writing in the depths of the Cold War and under harsh Soviet censorship, and after a 5-year confinement in the Gulag, and just months before he was to be permanently exiled from his homeland, from the city he loved, to the West. He was to write many poems about Christmas before his death in 1996. And his understanding of Herod and Herodians as a force cascading through history from Christ's time to our own infuses many of them. Here's more from December 24th, 1971, the poem I just quoted to you. Herod drinks. Every wife hides her child. He who comes is a mystery. Features are not known beforehand. Men's hearts may not be quick to distinguish the stranger. But when drafts through the doorway disperse, the thick mist of the hours of darkness, and a shape in a shawl stands revealed, both a newborn and a spirit that's holy. In yourself, you discover. You stare skyward, and it's right there, a star. I suppose I've had Brodsky and Russia on my mind this past week because of a small news story that's been running beneath the fold. Under the news of Israel and Gaza, under congressional differing about aid to Ukraine, under the uproar over university presidents and charges of campus anti-Semitism, has appeared a small story. News that his family and allies in Europe and America have lost contact with the imprisoned Russian dissident, Alexei Navalny. He's vanished. Navalny, as you may know, is the leader of the opposition party in Russia. Telegenic and possibly handsome, witty, whip-smart, fearless. Navalny has been named by commentators as Vladimir Putin's most feared enemy because, in the words of one pundit, Navalny understands himself as having nothing to lose. Navalny himself has a habit of stiff-arming glory and attempts at worship. Navalny is the opposite of a paranoid narcissist, pointing always to the other. I guess I'm a kind of politician, he once said to a reporter. This is the testimony given by John, you could say. And Navalny's relentless focus has been political corruption in Russia, which has enriched beyond calculation a small group of men around President Vladimir Putin, while simultaneously denying civil rights and freedom of expression to millions of their fellow citizens. Navalny, you may remember, was poisoned by a military-grade nerve agent in the summer of 2020. He left Russia to seek treatment in Germany and was then arrested upon his return, upon landing in St. Petersburg. This is the testimony given by John, you could say. Something having to do with the basic mechanics of Christmas. What Brodsky's poem so many years ago captured was that the testimony of Navalny and others repeats a kind of sounding joy, repeats that somehow God has not forgotten the world, abandoned us completely to the power of Herod. I suppose I've followed personally the fortunes and the testimony of Alexei Navalny for some years now, because he helps to keep my faith alive in a way. Another poet, the late Marianne Moore, put it this way once: one sees in such loveliness, never deflected, how by darkness a star is perfected. So, back to the Baptist. How by darkness a star is perfected. A devout Jew pointing beyond Judaism. A leader assuring all within earshot that he is actually a follower. I'm guessing John knew the words offered to us this morning by the prophet Isaiah, as you heard them. For as the earth brings forth its shoot, and as a garden causes what is sown in it to spring up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring up before all the nations. This, friends, is how we profess the story ends. John seems to know, doesn't he, how the story will end. That is where his hope is founded. That is where his bravery springs forth from. And that it is in attaching ourselves to that story and attaching ourselves to a God who will not forsake creation. It is in those attachments that our deepest joy is to be found. Strength for the work ahead. Hope in the midst of despair. Light in the dark. Lord, hasten to bring in your kingdom on earth, when no one shall hurt or destroy, when wisdom and justice shall reign in the land, and your people shall go forth in joy. Amen. Standing together, we affirm the ancient faith of our church in the words of the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty,